well, when we have these razor-thin margins, whether it's approval of a Supreme Court justice or it is approval of a piece of legislation or a cabinet nominee, we've got to get to a place where we're back to supermajorities, we're back to there being a voice for the moderate and incentive to be part of that so that there's more collaboration and more working together. Otherwise, I very much fear for the country in this downward spiral when it comes to political discourse, when it comes to discussion about policies that are impacting millions and millions of people's lives every single day, much less the Supreme Court and all of the things that are going to come before it over the next several decades.
Leslie, it's kind of hard to deny this was a pretty good week for President Trump. He accomplished a great deal, but his biggest, obviously, is the Supreme Court nominee, a campaign promise that he's made for some time now.
The president actually has had numerous successes that don't get talked about a lot. There's usually some sort of cloud around them, but the bottom line is he manages to execute upon them and deliver on a lot of those campaign promises, which is not something you see in Washington, and he does it with very sharp elbows. We already know, we've had many discussions about how people feel about his character, his style, his unorthodox approach. But when it came to this issue, he pushed ahead, even though, despite the fact a few times in there he was waffling on Judge Kavanaugh when he was like, well, I just met him a few weeks ago, when things were looking dark. All of a sudden, he was not invited to the party anymore. But he rode that through, and because of this, and because of what we heard earlier, is as Republicans got very energized. They came together, the base Republicans, establishment Republicans, conservatives, women, because they did not want to see a judge treated unfairly. And that looks very well on the political map. But now that you will see a confirmation, the real question is if that energy is maintained. And I think the energy is certainly going to be maintained on the left, but on the right, they've seen these successes with the president.
Michael, I'm curious, what are you watching in the next couple of weeks as we head into midterms?
Well, one thing I'm watching is to see if the energy that we've seen stays in place and how it changes and morphs. And because, it can all turn around. Who knows what President Trump's going to say tomorrow? So we don't know. I thought it was somebody smart said that a week ago, Democrats were at a 9 on a 10 scale and Republicans were like at a 6.5. Now Republicans are at an 8.5. In other words, they're close to closing that gap. And if that stays the case, I think it makes it very difficult for Democrats to take the Senate. The House is probably gone for Republicans, but it certainly makes some more races more competitive. But will the passion stay? And I've heard some Republicans say, I'm worried that if once the win comes, assuming it does, that Republicans may say, okay, good, we won that, and then they just go home, go back to watching football, which is a lot more fun than watching politics, and they don't show up in November.
Michael Graham, Leslie Sanchez, Linda Tran, I want to thank all of you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. We are watching live coverage of the Senate floor's final vote expected any moment now from Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Stick with us. You're streaming CBSN. Always on. Well, Kavanaugh appears to have enough votes to be confirmed after two key lawmakers confirmed their support Friday afternoon. The Senate is set to cast their final votes later today. Hannah Doba reports from Capitol Hill.
Our highest court.
Susan Collins ended weeks of Supreme Court drama in the Senate with these words.
I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
In a 43-minute speech Friday, the moderate Republican said she reviewed Brett Kavanaugh's judicial record and also pored over the FBI inquiry and testimony of Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who accused Kavanaugh of sexual assault when both were teenagers. But at the end of the day, she said the certainty wasn't there.
The four witnesses she named could not corroborate any of the events.
Moments later, lone Democrat Joe Manchin of West Virginia said he too will vote to confirm Kavanaugh. He struggled to be heard over protesters.
I looked at what was in front of me and I had to make a decision. I really did.
Alaskan Senator Lisa Murkowski was the only Republican to say she opposed Kavanaugh.
A judge should act at all times in a manner that promotes public confidence.
Even with Kavanaugh's confirmation all but certain, diehard senators argued through the night to a mostly empty Senate chamber.
Is he fit to be a jurist in the place where we have said justice in our country occurs?
We cannot set a standard of guilty until proven innocent, because then anybody can make any charge at any time.
If confirmed, Kavanaugh could be seated on the high court in the coming week. Hannah Doba, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
For more on Senator Manchin's decision, we're joined by Charleston Gazette-Mail political reporter Jake Zuckerman, who joins us now. So tell us a little bit about what the reaction has been in West Virginia to Manchin's announcement that he will vote for Kavanaugh.
Right. Yeah. Well, before the announcement, people kind of had a pretty good idea what was going to happen. And the prevailing wisdom was that Susan Collins would make her speech yesterday afternoon. And then Joe Manchin would come out with his position. And I mean, literally within seconds of Susan Collins concluding her speech, reporters had a news release. And eventually he's tweeted out a statement that said, yes, I will vote to confirm. I suppose among Republicans, the general line was that, yeah, he made the right decision here, but honestly, look at this decision-making process. Joe Manchin won't speak his mind until the vote is effectively decided. And Democrats, I think, were just pretty deflated. Joe Manchin has always been a centrist and willing to vote with Donald Trump, but he usually comes through at the end of the day for Democrats. If you look at the Affordable Care Act repeal efforts, or if you look at the tax bill. And I think that this was, a kick in the teeth 30 days before a tight election.
So, Jake, when it comes down to it, what do you think it was that determined Manchin to come forward and actually vote yes? Was it Collins' vote saying yes? Why do you think he chose to come forward?
That's hard to say. I think it's undeniable there's a political aspect to it. And when the vote was effectively decided, pick a winner. But, when he was saying yesterday in his interview with CNN, which you were showing clips of earlier, was, I believe Dr. Ford, something happened to Dr. Ford. I don't believe that the facts showed that it was Brett Kavanaugh, but I think something happened. And, there is a question of precedent here and standard of evidence and what does it take or what does it not take to disqualify a Supreme Court nominee. But, I also think that it's important to note how popular Donald Trump is in the state. He won by 42 points. He remains popular when we've seen his support dip nationally. So this is one of the key responsibilities of a president is to nominate Supreme Court justices. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of
routing his jurisprudence and smoke so thick.
We want to interrupt to take you to Senator Schumer now on the Senate floor making a speech.
Judge Kavanaugh doesn't belong on the bench because he was chosen by a president and a far-right organization, both dedicated to overturning and undermining Roe v. Wade. And he did not a thing to refute the presumption that he would want to overturn it too. Judge Kavanaugh doesn't belong on the bench because he was chosen by far-right organizations that are bent on repealing health care protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions. And he did nothing to refute the presumption that he would too. Judge Kavanaugh doesn't belong on the bench because he believes that presidents should not be subject to investigations of any kind while in office, a distortion of our founding principle that no person is above the law. Judge Kavanaugh does not belong on the bench because his jurisprudence is deeply skeptical of environmental protections, consumer protections, workers' rights, civil rights, LGBT rights, and rights of treaties and agreements with Native Americans, and a host of other hard-earned rights. Judge Kavanaugh doesn't belong on the bench because he has repeatedly misled the Senate, putting into serious doubt his credibility, and a judge must be credible, believable, and honest above all. Judge Kavanaugh doesn't belong on the bench because he is an extreme partisan, something we have seen from his earliest days in his career and reconfirmed when he gave one of the bitterest, most partisan testimonies ever presented by a nominee. Judge Kavanaugh doesn't belong on the bench because of his injudicious demeanor. His partisan screed will go down ignominiously in history, and made it clear it would be virtually impossible for him to rule impartially on the Supreme Court. Judges must be temperate, judicious, even-handed. Judge Kavanaugh is anything but. Republican leaders knew before he was nominated that Judge Kavanaugh was a very flawed choice. But once President Trump selected him, Republicans decided they had to rush him through. They became a steamroller over truth, fairness, and our traditions of bipartisan cooperation, any means necessary to reach their desired end. They blamed Dr. Ford and Democrats for Judge Kavanaugh's flaws. They were intent on shrouding the truth because they knew that if the truth came to light, Judge Kavanaugh would be exposed as a truly flawed nominee. So, my colleagues, my fellow Americans, what is the appropriate response? Our country needs to have a reckoning on these issues, and there is only one remedy. Change must come from where change in America always begins, the ballot box. So to Americans, the so many millions who are outraged by what happened here, there's one answer: vote. If you believe Dr. Ford and other brave women who came forward and you want to vindicate their sacrifice, vote. If you believe the Supreme Court should uphold women's rights, vote. If you believe the Supreme Court must protect health care and our pre-existing conditions that are protected now, vote. If you believe the Supreme Court should defend workers, consumers, the environment, civil rights, native populations, vote. If you believe the Supreme Court should be a check on an overreaching president, vote. If you believe the process here in the Senate was a sham, and you believe Americans deserve better, vote. If you believe that Supreme Court justices should conform to the highest standards of character, impartiality, temperament, and above all, honesty and credibility, vote. I understand, I share the deep anguish that millions of Americans are experiencing today. But I say to you, my fellow Americans, there is one answer: vote. I yield the floor.
We've been listening into the Senate floor as we know senators are entering the chamber to make that final vote on Brett Kavanaugh, who is expected to make it to the Supreme Court this afternoon. I want to bring in our panel. Michael Graham is a CBSN political contributor. He's also a Boston Herald columnist and politics editor at nhjournal.com. He joins us now from Boston. Michael, you heard Senator Schumer there pointing fingers, as you might expect, saying that Republicans steamrolled over the truth. We know that this has been such a political fight back and forth.
Right.
Where do we go from here?
Well, I thought that Senator Schumer made a both principled and completely partisan appeal there at the end. You know, go vote. You know, elections have consequences. And it's interesting because on the one hand, it's a great way to deal with, politics. You're not unhappy. If you're not happy, vote. On the other hand, it really shows that the game has been for Democrats in this fight, which is to win votes, to play on people's emotions and their anger and upset and drive them to the polls, which is a longstanding political tradition. It's not a Democratic trick or anything, but he really made it perfectly clear. It is 100% partisan, which, let's face it, given that virtually every Democrat except for 3 announced they were going to vote against him long before we ever heard the name Dr. Ford, it's been pretty partisan from the beginning.
I want to actually take you now back, Michael. We'll take our interviewers to the Senate floor where we see Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell speaking ahead of the vote.
Guards our courts. That, Mr. President, is why today is such an important day. That is why the vote we take this afternoon, a vote to confirm a new Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, represents one of the most consequential decisions a senator ever makes. The members of this body are duty-bound to ensure we confirm justices of the Supreme Court who are men and women of the highest character and the most superlative qualifications. So fortunately, that is just the sort of nominee who stands before us today. 12 weeks ago, the president nominated a jurist who's been described by legal peers of all political stripes as a superstar, a serious scholar, and who is legendary for his preparation and possesses the qualifications, the temperament, and the judicial philosophy to be an excellent Associate Justice. The president nominated a brilliant student of the law. Those who taught and knew the nominee at Yale say, quote, "It is hard to name anyone with judicial credentials as strong as Judge Kavanaugh." They describe a true intellectual, a leading thinker, and a wonderful mentor and teacher. And those he's mentored, a diverse group of bright young lawyers who've clerked for Judge Kavanaugh, talk about his work ethic, his unflinching, honest advice, and his fundamental humility. For 12 weeks, the Senate has seen that this is not empty praise. We've seen the legendary preparation of a tireless judge. We've seen the patience of a committed mentor and teacher. We've seen the humility of a true intellectual who let his record speak for itself. Each of us have seen this for ourselves. Every senator who came into this process with an open mind has seen that very same Brett Kavanaugh firsthand. We've seen his brilliance, his painstaking thoroughness on display in the 300-plus opinions he issued on the D.C. Circuit. For 12 years, Judge Kavanaugh excelled on the bench that many experts see as the second most important court in our nation. We've seen his geniality and kindness firsthand in our private meetings with the nominee, precisely the collegial approach that is so necessary on the court. We've seen his professional excellence as we reviewed more pages of documents pertaining to Judge Kavanaugh's career than for any other Supreme Court nomination in our history. Pages that depict a meticulous and dedicated public servant. And yes, we have now studied the results of seven FBI background investigations, inquiries that have produced no evidence whatsoever to corroborate any prior misconduct, but rather are consistent with all we know about this nominee's sterling character. This historically tall mountain of evidence adds up to one clear message. Judge Brett Kavanaugh is among the very best our nation has to offer. He will make the Senate and the country proud. He will serve with distinction on our highest court. He unquestionably deserves confirmation, and the country deserves such a Supreme Court justice. Now, Mr. President, as I've explained, the stakes are always high, where a Supreme Court confirmation is concerned. But this time, the stakes are higher, a lot higher than they've been in the past. I can't sum this up better than our friend and distinguished colleague, the senior senator from Maine, put it in her historic remarks yesterday. This is what the senior senator from Maine said: "It is when passions are most inflamed that fairness is most in jeopardy." She said, when passions are most inflamed is when fairness is most in jeopardy. We all know the events of recent weeks have strained the country's comedy and fanned the flames of partisan discord. But even more critically, our very commitment to the basic principles of fairness and justice is also being tested. Basic principles of fairness and justice being tested right here. A vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh today is also a vote to send a clear message about what the Senate is. This is an institution where the evidence and the facts matter. This is an institution where the evidence and the facts matter. This is the chamber in which the politics of intimidation and personal destruction do not win the day. That this is the body whose members themselves uphold the same commitment to American justice that we seek in the judges we examine. A vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh today is a vote to end this brief, dark chapter in the Senate's history and turn the page toward a brighter tomorrow. The chamber we are privileged to occupy is often called the world's greatest deliberative body for good reason. We're called the world's greatest deliberative body for a good reason. When the rubber meets the road, when the hour is critical, when a historic precedent needs to be set, the United States Senate most often finds its way to doing what is right. Today, we can honor that history. We can vote to turn away from the darkness. We can vote to set a precedent about fairness and judgment that will define this body for the better. We can vote to confirm an excellent Supreme Court justice who will make the Senate and the American people proud. I yield the floor.
As a reminder to our guests in the galleries, expressions of approval or disapproval are not permitted in the Senate galleries. Under the previous question, all post-cloture time has expired. The question is on the nomination. Is there a sufficient second?
There is a sufficient second.
Sergeant-at-Arms will restore order in the gallery.
Is Is there a sufficient second?
Is there a sufficient second? There is a sufficient second. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
The Sergeant at Arms will restore order in the gallery. The Sergeant at Arms will restore order in the gallery. Sergeant at Arms will restore order in the gallery. Sergeant at Arms has restored order in the galleries. The Sergeant at Arms will restore order in the gallery. The clerk may continue.
Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Booker. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Brown. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cardin.
What you're watching is the live image right now of the Senate as they are making the final vote on Justice Kavanaugh. We know there are protesters who have interrupted the Senate chamber from the galleries. I want to bring in CBSN political contributor Molly Hooper, who joins us now. She's a Capitol Hill reporter for The Hill. Molly, I can still hear the protesters. What are you hearing?
Sergeant at Arms.
I'm hearing what you're hearing. A lot of protesters, and it's something that we've been hearing for the past few weeks. Even before the allegations of sexual assault by Dr. Ford, this nomination has roiled, active Democratic bases who oppose the nominee and have been very vocal. I mean, if you look back at those hearings, the original hearings for Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation, the first few days, on an hourly basis, scores of people were taken out and arrested because they would stand up and protest as the hearing was going on.
The Sergeant at Arms will
Molly, I just want to confirm with you, I know we're hearing the protesters. Is this the final vote right now that they're calling up at this point? This is the final vote, just to be clear. I want to be clear on that. And, you're talking about the protesters. Vice President Pence opened up the session by saying you just can't show emotion from either side. And as we saw, these folks have been escorted out. I want you to walk us through, though, the procedure at this point as this vote is happening.
Okay, well, this is one of those votes that's a key monumental vote in the history of the Senate. And so what happens on this type of vote, it happened for the Affordable Care Act, the most recent version of immigration reform. The Senate Majority Leader will require that all the senators are seated in their assigned seats, as you are watching C-SPAN, I'm sure, and CBSN, of course. You'll see pictures of all the senators in their seats. This is not a normal procedure. Normally, they'll go up to the dais and vote either way and usually walk around. But at this point, we are seeing senators remaining in their seats and casting a vote from their seat. And the tally clerk will go through and read the names, and the senators will vote accordingly.
Mr. Graham.
And I want to also bring in the rest of our panel, Molly, if you'll stay with us as well. Leslie Sanchez, a CBS News political contributor and Republican strategist. Linda Tran, a Democratic strategist. Michael Graham as well, who joins us from Boston. All of them CBSN political contributors. Leslie, I want to start with you. I was just reading a short time ago an op-ed from the former dean of the Yale Law School who said that Kavanaugh will join the court as the black-robed embodiment of raw partisan power, inconsistent with any ideal of an impartial judiciary. When does the repair need to begin for the image that we are seeing of the Supreme Court and how partisan this has been?
Rena, I think that's an absolutely outstanding question. And it is for this reason. If you think back to Clarence Thomas, people talk about his 10-year silence. And there are a lot of reasons for that. He was overshadowed by some large voices on the court before he kind of came into his own, but you never saw him speak publicly. He certainly was not writing op-eds and lobbying on his own behalf or trying to change his public brand and image. He really kind of focused on what he needed to do. I don't know if we're going to get that same courtesy from Brett Kavanaugh. And I say it as a courtesy because there needs to be some space to see him do what he does best. There's not a question on the right that he's a qualified jurist. It is all of those other issues of character, judgment, temperament that are going to take a long time to heal, and he's only going to be able to do a service to that by respecting the new role he is honored and be given a gift to serve. And I think that's the respect he can give back to the public, is really do his job and not really politicize it any more than he is right now.
Linda, I want to bring in you as well here. It's hard to forget for Democrats and people on the left the name Merrick Garland. More than 400 days, the seat of Scalia was left vacant as the Obama administration tried to push him through. We know that Republicans had said, we want to wait. This is an election year. We don't want to vote on his seat right now. When we talk about this moment right now, this is really in the bag for Republicans, but we're hearing from the left more and more that they are going to work to try and unseat a man who has a lifetime appointment. Is that really realistic? And what do you hear?
Well, if it were to happen, it wouldn't be the first time in our history. Granted, that hasn't occurred in a very, very long time, over 100 years, to be clear. And so it would be unprecedented in the modern era. So, part of what you have to weigh is whether that is a rallying call, knowing that Election Day is just a few short weeks away, and it's a way to help people who are continuing to feel just downtrodden and extraordinarily upset about this moment, to help them stay focused on the prize, to make sure that people turn out. It's like Barack Obama always said, don't boo, vote. I mean, this is the moment for that, and you are going to continue to hear people talk about that. But, as we're waiting for the final results here, you're hearing all of this protest happening, and it is just such an indication of where we have come, how far we've fallen as a nation. The wounds are deep and the rift is wide, and anything is possible once Election Day comes and goes, especially if the House is taken by Democrats.
Michael, I want to bring you in to weigh in as well. We're talking about democratic institutions in this day and age, whether it is the Department of Justice, FBI, Supreme Court. There are a lot of people that have doubts in our democratic institutions. Is there a way to repair this?
We've gone through bad phases before. In the 1960s, we had literally people being, assassinated and, et cetera. And so then you had a lot of rejection of institutions. People forget the military was looked upon as disreputable and had a bad reputation. Now look where it is today. Things will change. The question is, what are the things you can do to start movement in the short term, and can you get political value out of it? Senator Jeff Flake's fundamental argument is there's no win in being someone who walks across the aisle. The other side of the aisle smacks you when you get there, and then your base punches you when you get back. And so where is this other space, this so-called middle ground? I don't know.
Rena,
yes,
I was going to say, he raises a really good point about faith in public-private institutions. And I'm going to harken back, historically looking back, just, in terms of the cyclical nature of this. After the 2008 the economic downfall, there was a tremendous sentiment where people lost faith in public and private institutions. They just never believed their 401ks would disappear overnight. They never believed the government could be so corrupt in the way that it was. And they just lost faith all the way around. But the last vestige of hope was in the court system. I mean, people have argued on the state level that there's a lot of bias, judges that litigate from the bench. But the Supreme Court was always this beacon. And now to taint that as well is really having a bigger impact. And this is where I say it's going to take time to see how we come out of that, but it's a very important conversation for the country.
Michael, whether we like to admit it or not, and whether Judge Kavanaugh cares, I actually apologize. Why don't we listen in right now? We are hearing senators voting in the affirmative right now.
Gardner, Graham, Grassley, Hatch, Heller, Hovind, Hyde-Smith, Inhofe, Isaacson, Johnson, Kennedy, Kyle, Langford, Lee, Manchin, McConnell, Moran, Paul, Perdue, Portman, Risch, Roberts, Rounds, Rubio, Sass, Scott, Shelby, Sullivan, Thune, Tillis, Toomey, Wicker, Young. Senators voting in the negative: Baldwin, Bennett, Blumenthal, Booker, Brown, Cantwell, Cardin, Casey, Coons, Cortez Masto, Donnelly, Duckworth, Durbin, Feinstein, Gillibrand, Harris, Hassan, Heinrich, Heitkamp, Hirono, Jones, Kane, King, Klobuchar, Leahy, Markey, McCaskill, Menendez, Merkley, Murray, Nelson, Peters, Reed, Sanders, Schatz, Schumer, Shaheen, Smith, Stabenow, Tester, Udall, Van Hollen, Warner, Warren, Whitehouse, Wyden. Mr. Murphy? Mr. Murphy, no.
As we are watching the final vote in the Senate for Judge Kavanaugh to make it to the Supreme Court, I want to bring in CBSN contributor Molly Hooper, who has been covering this also for The Hill as well. Molly, you know, as we're watching the votes come down, as we expected, right down party lines here, I'm just kind of curious about when we're talking about Republicans who stood by their party line on this. There were a couple of states in particular. I'm thinking of Colorado and Nevada, where you're seeing Senator Gardner, Senator Heller. These were states that Hillary Clinton won last go around. How were Democrats not able to pick off more Republicans on this?
Well, I think that if you look at what the judge and, well, soon to be justice as soon as this gavel goes down on the vote, has stood for, and the rulings that he's made, these are individuals, Cory Gardner and Dean Heller, who would support something like that, and they would support this vote. Unlike, say, perhaps Susan Collins, the more questions regarding Roe v. Wade, and the health care decisions. These are more conservative senators, Cory Gardner in Colorado, as well as Dean Heller. And in fact, Cory Gardner's in an interesting role because he is the head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. So he really does need to be, to follow what the president is putting out there in terms of his nominee.
Molly, walk us through this right now. We know we heard some votes in the affirmative, some in the negative as well, all down party lines as expected. Where does this go exactly as far as procedures?
Well, I mean, aside from Joe Manchin, who supports Kavanaugh, and he's in that red state in West Virginia, and Lisa Murkowski, who opted to vote present. She said last night that she was going to vote no, but would change her vote to present, essentially to cancel a yes vote of Steve Daines, who couldn't be here today because, incidentally, his daughter's getting married, and so he wanted to be there to walk down the aisle. It is largely along partisan lines, and as soon as they gavel this vote out, we have a confirmed a confirmed Associate Supreme Court Justice. And from there, we'll go through the regular process, all the pomp and circumstance that comes with that. The president usually brings the justice in, and they have to take the oath, and there will be pictures and whatnot at the Supreme Court as Kavanaugh is elevated to that role. Then we go from there. But essentially, largely after this vote, that's it. The Senate's out of it for the most part. I believe that Senator Mitch McConnell plans on having a press conference immediately following this vote. One item to note, however, is the Judiciary Committee's role in investigating the allegations, of Dr. Blasey Ford and following up on key items that were mentioned during that hearing. They may be pursuing more on how her name was leaked. I understand that Chuck Grassley is still, and his staff are still trying to get key pieces of evidence that Dr. Ford relied on during that testimony, but that largely at this point is not related to whether Judge Kavanaugh will be elevated to the bench, to the Supreme Court.
Very good point, Molly. I want to also bring in Michael Graham, who joins us now. Michael, if we can go to the wider shot earlier of the Senate floor, there was an image that caught my eye, if it's possible, Shannon, to bring that up. Seated down in front of, we don't have that image, okay, well, seated down there were the Senate pages, who are probably, I don't know, maybe high school, college age at this point. I'm just reminded of the Anita Hill hearings. I was an elementary-aged student at the time, Michael, and I think about the impact it had on my lifetime of that decision. What do you think about this younger generation who is watching this, might not be even able to vote at this point? What does this mean for them?
Well, my 15-year-old daughter asked me early on, after the allegations came out, that she said, "Daddy, why won't he just say he did it?" Like, what do you mean? I think it's mean of him to say he didn't do it. Well, because how about he didn't do it? He's telling what he believes to be true. And she had been so convinced because of the conversation.
Michael, I apologize. I'm going to interrupt you. We're going to take in Vice President Mike Pence right now. He's asking if anybody wants to change their vote.
The nomination of Brett M. Kavanaugh of Maryland to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States is confirmed.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
I ask consent the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, and the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection.
I suggest the absence of quorum.
Do you understand that?
Sergeant at Arms will restore order in the gallery. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Well, there you have it. Officially, a vote 50 to 48. Officially now, Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh has been voted in by the Supreme Court, making it the most conservative majority ever. I want to bring in our CBSN panel joining us now. Leslie Sanchez, I want to head to you right now. What does this mean for the Republican Party?
It's definitely, in terms of having a conservative jurist, it's certainly a very strong win. This is something that has been very important to Republicans for a variety of different reasons, and the president delivered on that, not once but twice. And it's really interesting if you look at the tweets. What it has also done is galvanize conservative women who, on an issue that they could rally around. The Independent Women's Forum has been sending out numerous tweets talking to Senators Flake, Senators Collins, Manchin, just, basically the four undecided, to really thank them for following with due process, not looking at how politicized this was, and moving forward. But I also think credit should go to Lisa Murkowski, because nobody's talking about that. She made a very tough choice against her party line, and because she felt in her gut, and other senators as well, that there was still going to be this cloud there, and that he wasn't the right nominee at the right time. So for Republicans, it's a win, but again, that cloud will continue to remain.
Linda Tran, where do Democrats go from here?
Democrats are going to continue to rally the troops. I mean, you've seen a lot of protests that is extraordinary and organic, with people coming in from all around the country trying to make their voices heard. And I wonder how it's going to have a chilling effect on people coming forward to share their stories of survival. In fact, we saw a video yesterday that went viral of a young woman, a 15-year-old girl, constituent of Joe Manchin's, who came to to Washington, D.C. with her mother to share her story of sexual assault. And you just have to worry about these individuals and the impact it has on them feeling like their voices didn't matter and that their stories weren't really heard. Democrats, as we head into the election, are going to continue to grapple with that level of rage and try to channel that into a sense of empowerment about what can be done, about how change can be affected, and that is through the ballot box.
Michael, whether Judge Kavanaugh wants this recognition or not, it is somehow he has become synonymous and linked to the Me Too movement. This has also become a story about sexual assault and sexual abuse. What do we say to women out there who feel like their voices will only be silenced?
Well, I think the thing to say is that if you want to see how someone can be heard, look at how Dr. Ford was actually treated by the Senate Judiciary Committee, who listened, who gave her the opportunity to tell her story. There weren't, people yelling at her from the bench. Obviously President Trump did not get that memo, apparently. But the Senate Judiciary Committee, it's hard to criticize how they treated Dr. Ford. If anything, they made the case, and I thought Susan Collins was very powerful on this yesterday when she called out whatever Democratic staffer who leaked the letter from Dr. Ford and forced her into the limelight. And that storyline is lost right now. People are too emotional. This is completely partisan. I think going back, Republicans will be able to say, we have not said don't speak, but we've also said that when you speak, we still have to treat everyone fairly. And Susan Collins was a tremendous voice for that argument in her speech yesterday, which, by the way, I think was one of the best political speeches from just a pure mechanical standpoint of accomplishing what she wanted to do that I've ever seen ever. I used to write speeches for candidates, and I thought, and people complained that it was too long. I thought it was absolutely terrific, and it gives Republicans a guideline for a path forward. Be compassionate, be open, but also be fair, and don't apologize for being fair. We're all grown-ups here, and sometimes there are tough issues, and sometimes there are he said, she said moments, and there's no reason to be juvenile about it at any level, from dismissing the woman to also saying, well, all women should just be believed. Neither of those positions are legitimate or credible, and that's a path forward that Susan Collins laid out in her speech yesterday.
Yeah, she really did go point by point, talking from Roe v. Wade to judicial temperament, going down every point in what was a 45-minute speech at this point. Right. Michael, I want to ask you, what is the message to men when it comes to sexual assault with this? Because we know Judge Kavanaugh fought this aggressively, fought it fiercely, and he came out strong. So is the message, fight it, you're going to survive? I
don't know. This is such an unusual circumstance. I think we're better at adjudicating cases where it truly is kind of a he said, she said, where there was an encounter and both people come away with a different view of the encounter. Remember, this is a case where we had somebody who said it absolutely happened, and I'm 100% sure it's Judge Kavanaugh. And the Kavanaugh says, I'm absolutely sure it wasn't me, and there was no corroborating evidence. You couldn't go to a single witness who could confirm or back up Dr. Ford's story. And so you really were left in this, polarized. It was just as polarized as our politics. There was no on one hand, on the other, and that was very, very tough. So I don't know that this is a case. If you're a man and you're looking for someone to rally around you because you're an abusive jerk and you think people are going to be okay with it, that was not this case did not work for you on that message at all. I think what it reminds people is, number one, take these accusations seriously, and number two, if you're a woman, people are ready to listen. They really are. Bring your evidence when it happens. Bring your story when it happens so that people can stand around you. I think it is really an unfair argument from Democrats that somehow women have been dismissed in this process. It would be very hard for someone to show me evidence to back up that case about this specific tale of Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh.
I want to bring in Molly Hooper, who's on Capitol Hill at this point. Molly, you had mentioned earlier sort of the procedures now and going forward. We're expecting a press conference from Mitch McConnell. Give us a sense of what you're hearing and seeing.
Well, that's what I am hearing. And earlier today, if you want to talk about conservative women who are fired up, this is, again, one of the things that after that Thursday hearing when I was over on the House side, following the hearing, running into some of my sources, anti-Trumpers, pro-Trumpers. The one thing that united them was that Kavanaugh was treated unfairly. They brought up a lot of points that I wouldn't have necessarily anticipated them to do. And this one issue actually, if anything, unified Republicans. And Lindsey Graham, of all people, one of the president's chief critics, said that this issue has unified Republicans more than any since Trump has been president. And it's not the he said, she said. It's the way that Judge Kavanaugh has been treated, or the way that both Dr. Ford and Kavanaugh have been treated in this process. And so,
Okay, great.
Mitch
Sorry, I'd love to
told
stay.
us earlier. Well, but Mitch McConnell said earlier, this is like a shot of adrenaline for us, and expect Republicans to keep this issue out there, calling this a, quote, shameless smear campaign by Democrats, and it's going to rev up Republicans. From what I understand, it's already revving them.
Yeah, we can see that. Molly, I want to thank you. I also want to thank Michael Graham, who you just heard a second ago. He's got to actually head out. He's been with us all day. But we do have Linda Tran and Leslie Sanchez. Linda, I want to let both of you, Linda and Leslie, weigh in on what Michael Graham was saying earlier.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And let me just say, I think Michael Graham is a very intelligent human being. I enjoy having these conversations with him, but I have never taken more issue with any commentary he has offered more than in this particular moment. The idea that likening somebody who suffered sexual assault with the accused both as victims shows you how unfair this entire situation has been. It's not he said, she said. You can't say that you believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford and then in the next breath say, but she's confused. You either believe her or you don't. And when she said that she was 100% certain that it was Brett Kavanaugh that assaulted her, that should have meant something. I mean, even the way that hearing was carried out, the fact that they had to bring in a female prosecutor whom they referred to as a female assistant because they weren't brave enough to confront and speak to her themselves. And that means all of the GOP men who were sitting on that committee, that tells you that they were very worried. They wanted to set this up so that it was the optics were appealing to them. And then when you get to the point where they called for an FBI investigation that did not even question the accuser or the accused, and you're hearing all of these stories, there was sworn testimony that was offered just within the last 24 hours from a friend of Christine Blasey Ford who said that he had spoken to her in 2016. She told him about Brett Kavanaugh by name at the time. There are all these people who are coming forward saying they tried to reach out to the FBI and their information, their evidence wasn't taken into account. And so there's no way you could possibly believe that the way that the investigation or the hearing was carried out was fair to Dr. Blasey Ford. And at the end of the day, you had a woman whose life was irreparably turned upside down because of the experience that she had. She's lived with it for decades, and now she can't even live in her own home. Her name is out there, and she is a piece of history that she doesn't want to have to be part of. And you've got a guy who's going to be on the Supreme Court, somebody who, even if you set aside whether or not you believe Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, even if you set that aside, exhibited temperament that is so unbefitting of a Supreme Court justice, it is detrimental to the nation writ large. I mean, it's just such a horrible moment for every American in this country. It has nothing to do with party.
Leslie, to Linda's point, a lot of women have felt like this was a moment that we hoped would lead to something more, and it didn't. But, we had, unfortunately, Michael had to leave. But, Michael's point was also that in this system, we allowed her to be heard. You might not agree with the FBI investigation. You might not feel like it was thorough enough, but she was allowed in a very public, highly rated, I will say. Many people tuned in to watch the testimony on both sides. But how do we move past this? In sexual assault, it's always he said versus she said, with very little evidence or information to corroborate either side.
No, it's so difficult, but Rena, first thing I have to do is say what she said. Yes, I agree. So what Liz said, there's so much of that we agree on, not as women, not as political operatives, but fundamentally in fairness. And fairness becomes the big issue here. So was it fair to bring Dr. Ford? It was appropriate. Was it fair to call her the female special prosecutor? She's a prosecutor. I mean, we could go on and on about these little slights and kind of what the judiciary had to do. But yes, I think that the problem is that, and I'm going to say that politically, the Democrats overplayed this accusation, and they piled on, and you had all of these other accusations, some so outlandish that it sounded very much like you were bullying and piling on Brett Kavanaugh. And that's what activated conservative women in the way you haven't seen since the Equal Rights Amendment, when they were fighting against the feminist movement, and it really, for the first time, created a conservative women's coalition, a movement for us. That's what this did. But the problem is we have weaponized sexual assault in a way to suit our own means. And the president did that when he was mocking Dr. Ford at a political rally. It just minimizes and trivializes what we should be mature enough to have an important conversation about. And I think that's where we want to see the Senate go. I think you will see it with more women elected, regardless of party. Women are known as elected officials to be people to reach across the aisle, to look for different alternatives in different ways. Look at the Collins-Murkowski as a great example of that. Two women from the same party come to a different conclusion. Yes, they have different constituencies, but they're willing to take that bullet, so to speak, whether it's bucking their party, challenging the party, or falling in line with leadership. And that's where this is going to go. But again, the ripple effect for young girls, for candidates, and for parties will be felt for at least a generation.
I have a feeling you and I, we will all three be talking about this on this very channel for weeks and months to come. For a generation. I don't know that I can sit in the seat for a generation, but Leslie Sanchez and Linda Trent, I want to thank you both very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So Brett Kavanaugh officially announced in the Senate as the next Supreme Court justice, making him the 114th justice with a conservative majority as well. He ascends to the nation's highest court. This right now that you are seeing is in a GOP press conference, a leadership conference we are expecting regarding today's official vote confirming Justice Kavanaugh. We'll have much more, including this live event. Stick with us. You're streaming CBSN.